She had reported from war zones across 4 decades, from the Iran-Iraq conflict to the siege of Sarajevo, from post-9/11 Afghanistan to the Arab Spring uprisings. But nothing had prepared Christiane Amanpour for what she witnessed during her investigation in Tel Aviv in 2003. Standing in a nondescript office building in the city's tech district, she watched as engineers demonstrated technology that seemed pulled from science fiction. Facial recognition systems that could identify individuals through surgical masks, AI algorithms that predicted terrorist attacks with 89% accuracy, autonomous weapons systems that made kill decisions without human input. "This is remarkable," she told her Israeli guide, a former Mossad officer turned venture capitalist. "When will this technology be available commercially?" He smiled, with the weary expression of someone who had heard this question many times before. "Ms. Amanpour," he said quietly, "what you're seeing isn't the future. It's the present. We've been using these systems for 5 years already. The question isn't when they'll be available. The question is when the rest of the world will be forced to adopt them." That conversation would fundamentally alter her understanding of how technological innovation actually works in the 21st century. Because what she had stumbled upon was not just Israel's tech sector. She had discovered humanity's primary testing ground for technologies that are too dangerous, too controversial, or too invasive for other societies to experiment with openly. She had found the future laboratory. The conventional narrative about Israeli technology follows a familiar pattern. It celebrates the startup nation phenomenon, attributes success to military-civilian technology transfer, and marvels at the innovation density of Tel Aviv. This narrative treats Israeli tech as an isolated success story, a small country punching above its weight in global innovation rankings. But this celebration obscures the deeper, more disturbing reality of what makes Israeli technology unique. Israel isn't just creating technologies for global markets. It is beta testing the surveillance, control, and warfare systems that will define how governments interact with citizens in the coming decades. The technologies being perfected in Tel Aviv today will be deployed in London, New York, and Berlin tomorrow, often by the same companies that first tested them on Palestinian populations. This is the uncomfortable truth about the future laboratory. Every technology that seems dystopian when proposed for Western societies has already been normalized through years of operational testing in Israel-Palestine. The ethical barriers that prevent other democracies from implementing comprehensive surveillance states have been systematically dismantled through the laboratory of occupation. Consider the evolution of biometric identification systems. When European governments proposed mandatory fingerprinting of all citizens in the 1990s, the public outcry was immediate and fierce. Privacy advocates warned of authoritarian overreach. Civil liberties organizations filed lawsuits. The proposals were shelved or significantly scaled back. But in Israel, the same technologies were implemented gradually, each step justified by security necessities. First came fingerprinting at checkpoints for Palestinians, then biometric ID cards for all residents of the occupied territories, then facial recognition systems at border crossings. Finally, comprehensive biometric databases linking movement patterns, family relationships, and political affiliations. By the time European governments revisited mandatory biometrics in the 2000s, Israeli companies could offer turnkey solutions based on 15 years of operational experience. The technology had been debugged, the implementation procedures refined, and most importantly, public resistance had been overcome through the normalization process. What began as emergency measures in a conflict zone became the standard template for modern identity management systems worldwide. This pattern repeats across every category of emerging technology. Drone warfare was perfected over Gaza before being exported to Afghanistan and Yemen. Predictive policing algorithms were trained on Palestinian movement data before being sold to police departments in Chicago and London. Social media monitoring systems learned to identify potential terrorists by analyzing Arabic posts before being adapted to track domestic dissidents in Europe and America. The laboratory operates through a sophisticated ecosystem of research institutions, defense contractors, and venture capital firms that have mastered the art of dual-use development. Technologies are initially developed for military or security applications, tested in operational environments, refined based on real-world feedback, and then commercialized for civilian markets globally. This process allows Israeli companies to offer something their international competitors cannot: proven effectiveness under extreme conditions. When an Israeli startup pitches a crowd monitoring system to European police forces, they can provide data from years of managing Palestinian demonstrations. When they sell cybersecurity software to American corporations, they can demonstrate its effectiveness against state-sponsored hackers who have been trying to penetrate Israeli systems for decades. The laboratory advantage extends beyond technical capabilities to include something more valuable: normalized acceptance of invasive technologies. Israeli society has been conditioned to accept levels of surveillance, monitoring, and control that would trigger massive resistance in other Western democracies. This social conditioning serves as a proof of concept for how democratic populations can be gradually acclimated to technologies that fundamentally alter the relationship between citizens and states. This process fascinated Amanpour during her investigation on smart city technologies. Tel Aviv had implemented one of the world's most comprehensive urban monitoring systems, with sensors tracking everything from vehicle movements to pedestrian patterns to noise levels. The system could identify individuals by their walking gait, predict crime hotspots 6 hours in advance, and automatically alert authorities to unusual behavior patterns. How did residents react to this level of monitoring? She asked the city's chief technology officer. There was no reaction, he replied matter-of-factly. When you live with rockets and suicide bombers, cameras and sensors feel like protection, not intrusion. Privacy is a luxury we can't afford. This response illuminated the laboratory's core methodology: the normalization of invasive technologies through the manipulation of threat perception. By maintaining a constant state of emergency, Israeli society provides the perfect testing environment for technologies that would be rejected by populations living under normal conditions. The implications of this system extend far beyond Israel's borders. As Western societies face increasing challenges from terrorism, pandemic management, climate change, and social unrest, they are turning to Israeli-tested solutions that promise order and security in exchange for privacy and autonomy. The laboratory is exporting not just technologies, but entire frameworks for managing populations under stress. The COVID-19 pandemic provided a case study in how this export process operates. When governments worldwide needed systems for tracking population movements, monitoring quarantine compliance, and managing vaccine distribution, Israeli companies were ready with proven solutions. The contact tracing systems, deployed across Europe, were adaptations of technologies originally designed to monitor Palestinian movements. The digital health passports implemented globally were based on systems first tested in Israeli settlements. Most remarkably, these implementations faced minimal resistance from populations that had previously valued privacy and civil liberties. The emergency conditions created by the pandemic had temporarily transformed Western societies into laboratories themselves, making them receptive to technologies they would have rejected under normal circumstances. This reveals the laboratory's ultimate product, not just technologies, but the social conditions necessary for their acceptance. By demonstrating how democratic populations can be conditioned to embrace comprehensive surveillance and control systems, Israel provides a roadmap for the transformation of liberal societies into managed democracies. The future laboratory operates according to a simple but powerful logic. What is unthinkable today becomes inevitable tomorrow if the conditions are properly prepared. Technologies that seem dystopian in theory become normalized through practical implementation under crisis conditions. Populations that resist surveillance in peacetime accept monitoring during emergencies and often never fully return to their previous expectations of privacy. As her investigation concluded, Amanpour realized that studying Israeli technology required looking beyond the innovations themselves to examine their true purpose, the systematic testing and refinement of the tools and techniques that will define governance in the 21st century. The future laboratory isn't just developing tomorrow's technologies. It is conditioning humanity to accept tomorrow's world. The question facing other societies is not whether they will adopt Israeli-tested technologies, but whether they will have any choice as the challenges of the coming century make the Israeli model appear increasingly necessary for survival. The laboratory has already chosen the future. The rest of the world is simply catching up to experiments that have been running for decades, perfected through conflict and refined by populations who learned to trade freedom for security.